political military. Secretary, wouldn't you say that in the last administration under Joe Biden, Secretary Austin, Mark Milley, we've never seen the military politicized in a way that it was over those 4 years?
Senator, I would say our mission has been to take the politics out of the military, take the ideology out of the military. And as a result, you've seen the response of young Americans who have, I called it a bump at first. I just want to correct that, Senator. It's been a tsunami. It's been a historic response of young Americans
I want to unpack it. I want to unpack this with you, Mr. Secretary. Prior to President Trump's election, the military was struggling with the worst recruitment crisis in 50 years. That all seemed to have changed overnight on one specific day. And the chart shows it. The Army doubled its recruitment from November of 2024 to the previous November. The Navy, the same thing. The Navy's recruitment skyrocketed 80% from November of 2024 to the previous year. Mr. Secretary, what changed?
There was an election, Senator.
Why does that matter?
Because leadership matters, sir. Belief in your country matters. Having the back of your troops matters. Setting a clear mission matters. Ensuring that if troops are used, it's for a clear, defined mission. It's funding them properly. It's giving them the proper authorities to execute. Americans watch what happens with their political and military leadership. And in President Trump, they understand they have a commander-in-chief that has their back, that loves the country, that loves them. Our job has been to reflect that through the department by getting rid of all the distractions, by enforcing the basics, by getting back to standards and readiness. And as a result, we've seen a generation of young people stand up and say they want to serve under President Trump.
These numbers have steadily increase. As you said, you called it a tsunami. I mean, I call it the Trump bump because it did begin on one day, but every month since we've seen those recruitments for the Army and the Navy, especially the best Navy recruitment in 20 years, the best Army recruitment in 15 years. How do we keep that up?
Well, sir, I think we keep that up by staying true to what we said we would do to those young Americans and their families. I wrote a book before I started this process, talking to a lot of vets and their families who are wondering whether they would recommend military service to the next generation. I hear from them and others who say, now we're willing to do that under this president's leadership. Staying true to who we are, staying true to the basics, the Constitution, their core mission, keeping them ready, funding them and supplying them properly, and then having their back, truly. Matters. And I think by doing that and then emphasizing recruiting and the basics, I think we'll continue to be able to be on the right trajectory.
Mr. Secretary, I've never seen a Secretary of Defense that's so in tune with our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen and Marines as you. You've gone out and you're visiting with them, you're talking to them every single day. What kind of stories are you hearing, especially from our newest recruits? I mean, what are they telling you? What are they telling you specifically about why it matters?
Well, I'll start with those that are re-enlisting or they've been in for a while who say it's all changed. The entire environment's changed. The morale, the spirit. They feel the change. They feel the idea that if I'm given a job to do, I'll be given everything necessary to do it, the authorities to do it. I'm not being micromanaged. I know that my commander will have my back. And then the young people, it's just excitement about the possibility of serving under President Trump, of being a part of something greater than themselves, and knowing that that in the White House they've got a commander who will defend their interests.
It's really about the, as I said, I mean, as my colleague was talking about, an apolitical military. I mean, the wokeness, the radical transgender movement, the way the abortion travel mandates, the way the last administration politicized the military. There was a survey in 2023 that pointed this out. It said that, and the Army released the survey in 2023 that claimed that young Americans' fear of discrimination drove away more recruits than wokeness. And wokeness was a big indicator, too, in that survey. Do you think those arguments still stand up today?
Senator, you make a great point. Every American wants to be treated like an individual, not because they're black or white or male or female, rich or poor, or because of some calculation of what we need more of or need less of, but simply, can you rise to the challenge of this job of service to your nation? That challenge inspires young people, and that's what we've seen.
Yeah, I think the Commander-in-Chief matters. Mr. Secretary, you matter. General, you matter. Thank you for your leadership. The facts speak for themselves. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Banks. Is there objection to putting a representation of the chart in the record at this point? Without objection, it'll be ordered.
Mr. May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Reed.
I note that the chart starts in November 23 and goes to November 24, and President Biden was president through the entire period. So you're suggesting that the significant ramp-up took place immediately after the election day, which would have been 20 days of November 24?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Senator.
Do you
And
have
the
any-
numbers speak for themselves.
Do you have any data to suggest that?
The General of the Army told me so, and I'm happy to, yeah, if you ask for those numbers from the Army, you'll see the same dynamic that I have. The election of Donald Trump serving as the election of him and the indication to those recruits around the country that he's going to become the commander-in-chief actually mattered. And those numbers have risen dramatically ever since Election Day.
There was no impact of the administration's activities over several years before that, and also through the period of November 23, which was encompassed the Biden administration. It's funny you get a Trump bump while Biden is president of the United States. So I'd be curious to see that data.
I think it's incredible as well, sir.
Unbelievable might be a better word.
Mr. Secretary, close to 5,000 Marines and National Guards have been deployed to LA without the request or consent of the California governor or the Los Angeles mayor, Bass. Rather than calming the situation, this troop deployment is purposefully inflaming and escalates tensions. You claim lethality is your top priority. Do you plan to unleash this lethal force against U.S. citizens and civilians in LA and other cities?
Well, Senator, I would reject most of the characterization of that statement, including lethality against U.S. cities, when all of those National Guardsmen and Marines have conducted themselves with the utmost of professionalism, defending our federal agents, Americans, who deserve to be able to do their job to deport illegal immigrants after the previous administration allowed 21 million illegals to cross our border. I am not here to listen
to rhetorical responses. I would like to have a professional response that I would expect from somebody who is the Secretary of Defense. Millions of people peacefully demonstrated this weekend against the president acting like a king. Given this regime's dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., the politicizing of the military is a legitimate concern. So, given the dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., if ordered by the president, I'm going to ask you once again, to shoot peaceful protesters in the legs, would you carry out such an order from the president?
Senator, as I've said before, of course, I reject the premise of your question and the characterization that I would be given or are given unlawful orders. It's all meant to attempt to smear the commander-in-chief, and I won't fall for it.
Considering that the president in his first term actually ordered such a thing, it is not a premise that you can reject. He can order, do the same thing. So you're, again, I think you would just follow what the president wants you to do. Let's face it, it is not normal to call up our troops in this way, and there is active litigation against this deployment. Will you follow a court's order regarding whether or not this deployment is legal? If the court says this deployment of troops into our cities is not legal, would you follow that court's order?
It's pending in the courts, Senator.
Well, when the court decides, would you follow that court's order, decision?
I don't believe district courts should be determining national security policy.
So you will not be following that.
When it goes to the Supreme Court, we'll see.
Court. And unless the president decides to appeal, there you have it. So I take it that you don't consider district court decisions to be legitimate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered. I think when I was a kid, his birthday was a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename? And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to.
Not
Talk to people that serve at
history,
Bragg.
it's recognizing
Ask people that
history.
serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. Let me talk about the budget. I don't understand why the budget is coming to us in two pieces. Why not give us an honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in recognition, in reconciliation? As I understand it, OMB is saying we're going to have a flat defense budget for the next 4 or 5 years. Are we planning reconciliation every year from now on? Why not give us an honest budget telling us what your priorities are, and then we can consider it. This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on a defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget, and yet you're giving us this, this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting, in the base budget, you're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation. Are we going to have reconciliation every year, which basically, by the way, puts a significant part, 10 or 15% of the defense budget in a wholly partisan decision-making process, whereas in the history of this committee, it's always been bipartisan. Why are we doing it this way?
Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
that's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's 2 bills, 1 budget.
Haven't asked my
We're
question
working with
yet. Why is it-
OMB,
why is it
and
being
we
done
feel
this
very
way?
comfortable
Why is
with
it
the
being
number of
done this way?
$961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question.
Senator, this is a straight-up budget for the Defense Department, and it's a
It is
13%
not.
increase over what Joe Biden
It is a
gave us.
two-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget. I don't understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward budget instead of this son of Oko that you're putting over on us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.